This is Thomas, and today we're going to be talking about a topic that's got Christopher Nolan hot and bothered, really taking you to another dimension, the fourth dimension in particular, and that dimension is time. Today I want to teach you how to be a time bender. Really, there's really two areas when it comes to time that people are really most concerned of on a day-to-day experience, whether it's in how they do their work or it's from the aspect of how they experience their life. And that is the experience of contracting time, making time feel like it's less and less and less, so it passes by really quickly, or making time expand, making little moments seem like it lasts like a really, really long time. So that's going to be the topics for today. Before we get to that, definitely go check out the link in the description. We are going to be giving you the Refined Leadership Blueprint, topics related to peak performance, effective communication, and advanced leadership. We're just skimming the surface with this 108-page manual. Go click on that link and download that manual while it's still free. Check it out. I look forward to seeing you on a future program with me. So back in the topic with regards to time. So time is this really complicated, esoteric thing, which I mentioned Christopher Nolan at the start of this video. And it's really fascinating because the guy is obsessed with time because really that's what life is made of. I'm talking really, I could be talking really, really quickly, or I could be talking really, really slowly. And it changes our perception of time because it's not actually the time that's passing by, but the time that feels like it's a very, very long time, or it's very, very short depending on what's going on. I got this homeless guy yelling at me right now, which is fair. We're in Chicago. We got the sirens going on behind me, things honking, trains going. These couple of seconds feel like a very, very long time. But when I get into my mode, start to get talking, it starts to feel really, really short. In fact, the last video I just filmed, I think it went for something like 20 or 30 minutes, but it felt like 5 minutes. It's absolutely crazy to see what happens to time and our experience of it. And that's really what we care about at the end of the day, because we look at the clock right behind me and the time passes a very static and consistent rate, 1 second after the next, 1 minute after the next, 1 hour after the next. And we could actually visually see it, but our sensation of that time actually changes. And that's really what we care about, especially when it comes to work. We want things that feel hard, that feel difficult, that feel arduous, that feel that are painful, because really if you want to get good things in life, you have to go and do painful things. So if you want to experience those things and get through it quickly, it actually helps to be able to contract that time to make it feel like it's going by faster. And then if you think about times with your loved ones, or times doing things that you enjoy, or times doing things that you actually really love to experience, you want to make little moments actually last forever. I'll give you an example of this phenomenon of how experience of time changes over one's life. Imagine how long, you're, up to the age until 10, that felt in your life. And then imagine how long it felt between the ages of 10 and 20. You're going into a new grade with a new class and new teachers every single year after year, all the way throughout middle school, high school, for most of you throughout university and college, and for a lot more of you to postgraduate studies after that. And then you have your work, and then basically what happens when you go into your job? It basically flies by. I could remember to this moment, I set almost like a check mark in my head when I walked into my first day of university. I was walking to my dorm room. I was looking around and be like, wow. It's like I'm going to look back at this one and be like, wow, the time really passed by. That was 12 years ago. That was 12 years ago when that happened. Probably more, probably 13 years ago at this point. And the time really just flew by. And all of you had a similar experience, that in your earlier ages, it feels like time lasts forever. 1 month, 1 year lasts forever. But then when you're older, when you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s, even for many of you in your 20s, depending on how you spent your 20s, it just flies by super quickly. And that's kind of scary, because the older that we get, the faster the time goes by and the less life that we feel like we have. So we have to do something in order to go collect these experiences and really feel like we're actually experiencing this one life that we have at the times that it's actually appropriate. And then on the other hand, you find yourself doing more and more and more difficult things. It can be pretty arduous, especially if you're spending late nights doing things, or you're going to work day after day, week after week, especially if you're on a very, very intense project that has a timeline associated to it. It can feel like the time's going by, super slowly, or it can't get there fast enough. We want to be able to change our experience at that time. And I want to give you sort of an unstructured way of going to go do that. The more structured stuff is for my programs in the future. But I want to give you some ideas to start playing around with in terms of how to expand and contract that time. But just the passage of time in our life is just one of those prime examples. You could also think about another adage that has to do with time in and of itself, and that is Parkinson's law. Parkinson's law is this funny little managerial concept that says that work tends to expand to fill the time by which it's allotted. In other words, if I say, hey, I'm going to give you 2 weeks to go complete a 20-page research paper. To do that in 2 weeks, it might take you a week to do research, another 5 days to write the paper, and then you're done. But if I give you 2 months to do that same 20-page research paper, it might not take you 1.5 weeks. It might take you 1.5 months, and then you start to speed up the process as you get closer to that timeline. It's kind of funny how that happens, but it has to do with how we structure our priorities. Our priorities, we tend to put it in 2 different buckets. Whatever is important, the things that we want to do, that we know we're supposed to be doing, that actually adds value to our actual life. And then there's the urgent things, the things that actually really need to happen quickly, urgently, must be done by end of day. And what tends to happen if you're not being good about managing your time is that all of your day is filled with things that just need to be urgently done. They just have to be done right now, like no if, and, or but about it. You just have to go and do it. So we want to be able to fill our day with important things as well. But Parkinson's law is basically saying, like, look, if I have 2 months to do something, I'm going to wait until it feels urgent before I get started. That's all that's saying. It's that most people have an inclination to do urgent things before they do important things. So if you give someone 2 years to do something, they'll go and procrastinate. And procrastination is not a time management phenomenon. It's really just an emotional phenomenon where people don't know how to manage their emotions effectively. And then only when they get to a point where urgency kicks in, something happens. It gets a kick of adrenaline. And that kick of adrenaline also, sometimes is associated with a dopamine spike or an excitement spike, a mood spike. You feel like, okay, now I have to go after this. And, this is especially pronounced in these adrenaline junkies, the people that want these peak experiences because they want to feel that crazy high that is associated with getting up and doing something that is, life-threatening or life-defying, if you will. But that sort of thrill that's associated with that adrenaline spike, people will get that associated with their work when they find that their timeline is closing in on certain things, that they actually start to do the work and they start to do it urgently and quickly and go after it. So sort of a sidebar against this. If there's anything that you find is really important that you want to get done urgently and right now, set a deadline. Set a deadline to it and then associate a consequence with not reaching that deadline. If you want to learn a little bit more about this, you can just go back to my video on the have-to mindset. It's one of my first videos I ever filmed. So in the have-to mindset, you'll learn a little bit more about doing this and the power of setting a deadline. When you set a deadline on something, what does that do to our experience of time? It actually makes it feel like time is going by faster. So that's really cool, especially if it's something that's very difficult to do and you actually want the time to be further and further and further away, but it's getting closer and closer and closer. The closer that time is passing by, it feels even closer than it actually is. That's a way of actually getting through actually really, really tough things. So you could actually see that you could change your perception of time based on the experience of what you do with these activities. Okay, so I'll give you one strategy. One strategy actually has to do with the video I just filmed last week. That has to do with mastering the mundane. If you play around with boredom is such an underutilized and an amazing sort of experience and phenomenon that most people don't play around with. It's so funny. I went to see this lecture with Andrew Huberman recently, and he talked about his experience. Andrew Huberman is this famous neuroscientist. Definitely check out his channel if you haven't. It's very, very rich with information. I love what he's done. I wish I could do what he's doing at the level he's doing it. But he talked about his time where he spent time with this other individual named Rick Rubin. Rick Rubin is known as being consulted by creative people for his ability to access their creativity. And Andrew Huberman talks about his time that he spent with Rick Rubin. And Rick Rubin has no skills at all. His skill is just being able to access a deeper sense of creativity and authenticity. And a lot of what they're doing all day is just sitting silently and very, very still and just not doing anything. And Huberman's like, what the heck is this? We're just sitting here, we're not doing much. And then he asked, is this a part of the process? And then Rick Rubin responded like, absolutely. This is absolutely functional and pivotal to the process. So that says something, when a genius like that's accessed and is contracted out simply for their creativity, spending a lot of time just simply doing nothing. They're not reading new texts, they're not watching new videos, they're not doing anything, they're just being still and allowing their brain to process things. That's a really, really powerful thing. And when that happens, sometimes something happens, something pops up, something really, really creative and interesting pops up. And that is the power of boredom. And embracing that boredom is you can go access different parts of your brain, but you also change your experience of time around those moments of boredom. Take this for example. If you have miniature moments of boredom that you have throughout your day, everything throughout the day elsewise just feels like it just goes by like super quick. You're consistently in a rush. You're rushing all the time, and then the day's over and you basically just coughed and like your day is over. It's in a weird way that could be useful, especially if it's really, really tough work. But another way, it's like kind of like you woke up and your life is over. It's like you kind of want to be there and experience your life at the same time. So you can actually change your perception around time by incorporating moments of boredom throughout your day. And of course, you could do that with, the refined workflow that I outlined inside of the refined leadership blueprint. Again, you could go download it in the link. So playing around with boredom is really useful, and I would encourage you to experiment with it first and see what that does. Does that actually make time feel longer and longer and longer, or does it make a time feel shorter and shorter and shorter? My guess is if you're sitting there and you're being bored, it feels forever. What feels like 3 minutes is actually 30 seconds, because like your brain desperately wants to grab that next bit of stimulus and wants to hop to that next day or hop to that next project or urgently pick up on something. Well, I'll explain this in a second, but you don't need to be rushing all the time. You can actually take a second and pause, and it changes your experience of everything else that you're doing. Kind of on that side note is on rushing. When you're rushing, you're just increasing your experience of adrenaline. You're making time go by really, really quickly, but are you actually getting more done? Think about it like this. If it takes me 60 minutes to get to a place, and I drive there 60 miles an hour, then it takes me 1 hour to go get there. But if I speed, right, I want to go over the speed limit to 70. I want to put my life in danger. I want to put the people that's in my vehicle, their lives in danger as well by speeding to 70 miles per hour. How much time are you really saving? You're actually saving maybe like 9 minutes. 9 minutes. You're putting your whole life and everything that's happening in front of you. You're saving 9 minutes of time. What could you actually do in those 9 minutes? The answer is you're probably not going to be doing really much. It calls into question why we rush for things in the first place. And actually, we could actually save more of our time by stopping rushing and actually taking moments to inject these moments of boredom where we're just stopping and we're just pausing and we're being still, so that when we get back to our work, we could be more focused. We're changing the quality of how we spend that time in the first place, okay? The quality of how we spend that time as opposed to just getting more done in that time. We're changing our perception, which, if you haven't got this already, you should be calling into question the difference between your perception of how time passes and then what actually gets done inside of that time. I mean, this is really like, again, I'm third time in this video. This is the third time I mentioned, the Christopher Nolan movies, but, he discusses time in a wide variety of different ways from, Inception. He talks about time dilation in the dream space, a minute is an hour in the first level of the dream, and then it's several days in the next level, and then several years in the next level. Interstellar is another one of those movies, how time changes around different black holes, for example. The time-space relativity changes, where what feels like an hour actually, in real time, many, many years pass by. Really interesting, but a very poignant example of that space-time relativity. Another example is Tenet, that movie where time inverts itself and it goes in reverse, and think about things in that way. Or one of his original movies, Memento, where he kind of shows and demonstrates what it's like to have insomnia by planting the movie, almost playing it forward and in reverse. So you have this feeling of consistently waking up to a new scene and you had no idea what happened before then. Or even something like his historic film, Dunkirk. He has a scene where basically in the air, it lasts over an hour. On the sea, I believe it lasts over a day. And I believe on the land, it lasts over a week. And basically all these events converge, with the magic of filmmaking. He's really trying to discuss, how we're susceptible to time and how time changes when it hits us. It's like, how do we measure time with our brains or with our bodies or our sensory organs? I have no idea, but it does change, and we can go bend time by changing our subjective experience of time. And if you haven't already, that's something you should be open-minded to, is that your experience of time actually changes based on what you were doing with that time. So boredom is one of those things. What's another thing you could do? Variety of experience, okay? So suppose you're doing one type of activity and then you shift to a different type of activity, okay? When you shift back and forth between these activities throughout the day, it can feel like time is actually going by pretty quickly because you're constantly being stimulated. In fact, you could probably create a correlation that the more stimulated that you are, the faster time goes. And maybe the less stimulated you are, maybe the slower time goes, or maybe less, not less stimulated, but the more painful it is. You can imagine playing a video game. It feels like time goes by really quickly, but you could be there for many hours. But when it comes to being in the cold, for example, or it comes to being in a cold shower, or think about going into an ice bath. Going into an ice bath, how long does 30 seconds feel? Feels absolutely excruciating forever. You're literally counting the seconds. It's as if the time slows down in a weird way. You could actually try this too. Try going for a run and listen to a song you typically listen to. When you listen to music and you go for a run and your heart starts picking up, it starts beating faster, the music actually sounds like it's going slower, which is the weirdest thing I've ever experienced back when I was a distance runner, is that time actually, the experience of music and sound actually feels like it's going slower with the increase of my heart rate. Really interesting how that works out, but that's another very poignant example of the change of the experience of time. So you could do it by changing what you're doing with that time, the variety of that experience. You could also change it with the emotional density behind each of these experiences. Is there lots of emotional highs and lows with what's going on? Whether it's a very, very positive one or it's a very negative one, or is it pretty stagnant? It's the same stuff over and over and over again. What also changes the experience of time is places. Something really interesting, there's a little part of the brain called the hippocampus, which is responsible for a lot of your memories. If you want to think about any long-term memory that you've consolidated, even short-term memory, but mostly the long-term memory, it's mostly located in a brain that kind of looks like a seahorse, hence the name a hippocampus. I think that's a Greek name for seahorse. So, but what's funny about the hippocampus is that the hippocampus is very spatially dependent. There's a small area inside of the hippocampus called the parahippocampal place area, which is responsible for remembering places. It's very spatially dependent. So you can develop a memory in one place and then go to a different place, and it's a completely different context. If I turn my body completely to the side or bring it back completely forward, I have two different realities right here. I have one reality, which is looking at the water, and one reality, which is looking back here at the camera, another reality where I'm looking up, another reality where I'm looking here. You can feel as if time has lasted forever just by being in many different places. Say, for example, you have an experience with someone you just met. You could get to know them actually really, really well by getting to meet them again in multiple places. You don't need to say, be on, 3 business dates or 5 business meetings or even 3 dates for that matter. You could literally, over the course of an hour, meet and introduce and talk to someone in one place, meet and introduce and continue talking to them in a different place with different people, and then talk to them in a different place with even different people. And what starts to happen is not only do they get the sense like they've known you for a while, but you also get the weirdest sense like you've known them for a very long time because you had these many different experiences with them. Even though only an hour has passed, you feel like you've known them for a very, very long time. Kind of associated with that experience is the experience of novelty, the newness of new things. When, back to going to different places, kind of associated to that is the novelty of, travel. Back when I was full-time traveling, I was in a new city every single weekend, coaching a group of guys, sometimes speaking in front of large audiences every single weekend at a different city around the world, which is a blast, But it was all throughout the year of late 2018, all throughout 2019 and early 2020. It felt like forever. It felt like I lived like 4 different lifetimes over the course of that year. Then you could guess as what happened in March of 2020, the whole world shuts down. And we're not traveling. We're doing the opposite traveling. We're not even going outside. We're staying inside. We put our masks on. We're doing our whole COVID protocols, all that good stuff. We're just watching the news and watching life happen. And then guess what? 2 years just blew away like it was nothing. Things started coming back. The vaccinations were coming up. The disease was sort of flattening out, if you were. They were flattening out the curve, which took much longer than we expected. But those 2 years just flew by. It felt like 3 months. So almost like, because there was no novelty, it was like the same people in the same house and the same television, the same cell phones, the same foods, the same deliveries, the same whatever is all in the same place. But there was no novelty, there was no newness to the place. It was the same place over and over and over again. And as a result of that, it felt like that time just flew by very quickly. So maybe as a means of making time feel like it's longer and longer and longer is travel. And travel doesn't mean you need to go to a different country. Sometimes it just means you need to go to a different town, or maybe to a restaurant you've never been to, or to an alley or down to a street you've never visited before, just because, dealing with like things you wouldn't otherwise go and do. And I actually recommend a lot of my clients to do this. Is like, do something you've never done before, just to go and explore what it's like to go and engage that world. It gives you better empathy. It gives you a better sense of what the world is made of. If you always order steak at your, very, very nice dinners, try a salad this time, see what happens. If you always order a salad, try a steak. See what it's like to actually go through that experience, like see what headspace that puts you in. If you're always a very agreeable person, try being disagreeable for some time. If you're always a very, very disagreeable person, try being agreeable for some time. What this does, it creates novelty. And in a weird way, while you get to experience a lot of different lives, you also get to expand time and feel the expansiveness of time by giving yourself those little bits of novelty. So there's a wide variety of different ways that you get to go and experience life, to go and make life and time feel like it gets wider and wider and wider. Going back to the last video, I mentioned flow state. Flow state is one of these phenomena which makes time feel like it goes by really, really quickly. You could probably think about some things you would rather go by extremely, extremely quickly. Anything that's difficult or hard to do or mundane or monotonous, you want to go by very, very quickly. If you can install very, very easy tasks and quick feedback associated with that over and over and over again, you will find that the repetitions go by extremely quickly. After that initial hump of, this is boring, this is harsh, and you allow that boredom to go accumulate like a stretched rubber band, at some point the boredom goes away and it snaps, and it all of a sudden becomes something that's just what you do. It's not like even discipline or a habit, it's just what you are now. That's a good place to be. So as far as flow state, it gets you to that place where you get to do these boring, monotonous, hard, arduous, repetitive tasks in a way that feels like it goes by really quickly. That's great. If you could get over those humps, you can access the same sort of results and rewards that all of the greatest people who have ever mastered any sort of craft have ever done. They simply got past that hump of, man, it's like, this is hard and I hate doing this. And they just kept going. And at some point, they started enjoying it again. They found it was like a phoenix that burned down and came back to life. It was rebirth in a new way, because you're now a new person. You had to become a new person in order to experience those things. To make things, I'd imagine you could also think of some things you want to last a very, very long time. You want the time to expand. So we talked a little bit about that, but something you could actually do with those moments is experience and go practice mindfulness. Mindfulness is really, really nice because it just says, I want to pay attention to this moment right here. Take a moment to slow down and just pay attention to your surroundings. Okay, there's a lot of words coming out of my mouth, but that's a moment to just stop, take a pause, and just pay attention to what's around you. It doesn't mean do nothing. It means like be attentive to the cars that are driving by and the sensation on your skin and what emotion do you feel right now. It's not nothing, it's something. It's like maybe a sense of getting towards something, or maybe a sense of being bemoaned over something, or you're kind of annoyed, or you're irked, or you're happy, or you're elated. Whatever it is, take a moment to pay attention to all these sensations, everything that's happening around you. You could actually, with your mind, force things to slow down. You could actually make things go and slow down if you create the intention to go do so. And you do that by paying attention to everything around you, really paying attention and collecting all the information, being aware of all the information that's coming in. And you could really make 1 minute really last like several minutes. This is especially important if you're a very, very busy individual. You want to spend time with your family, but you don't have the time. Not having the time is just a perspective. It's just something you decided. But what you can do is you can make that time feel very, very long by being very, very present and being very aware in those moments that actually matter to you. Time with your children, time with your friends, time with your family. You don't have this forever. If you act and behave in a way like you're never gonna die, you will never get to do the things that you always wanted to do. It will always be later on. I'll do that later. I'll do that after I get here. I'll do this. Just start now with all these things, because time isn't forever. No matter how much we expand and contract our time, time isn't forever. So I want you to be a master of being a time bender, so you can really change your experience of this amazing world and this amazing life. And maybe I'll leave you off with this last exercise. Just imagine what it's like to be moments away from your death. I don't care how you do it. It might be that you're on your deathbed and you're surrounded by your loved ones. You might be not in your deathbed. You might be alone in a street somewhere because you didn't build your life the way that you wanted to. And now you're just sitting there waiting for death to come and take you. But you know it's close. You know it's about to happen. And you're literally looking at those last few moments and you're like, God damn, like it's almost so sweet. It reminds me of this Chinese proverb about it's such a weird and simple one about a man being chased by a tiger. The man runs up the tree, you know, and then the tiger chases up a tree, and right before the tiger grabs him, he sees a strawberry up in the tree, and he takes a bite of the strawberry and proclaims, "Oh, how sweet it tasted," and then that's the end. Because how precious is something like that in those moments where it doesn't get to be there anymore. I don't care how happy you are, how deposed you are, how angry, how frustrated, anxious, wherever you are. You have to understand there is going to come a moment in your life, in my life, and everyone's life around us. There is going to come a moment where we only get to count the seconds before it's all over. And all we get to do is be thankful for the time that we have there. But now you get to come back to the present moment and realize you don't have seconds. You have years, you have decades, you have, you know, for many of you, close to a century before you even have to face that day. Be grateful and be thankful for it, and understand clearly what I'm saying here today. Go rewatch this video if you need to understand how you can change your perception of time to really work with you and for you at times that you need it most, whether it is to expand that time or to contract that time. Now, in the next video, I want to talk about a topic which, you know, has a little bit of anxiety around time, actually, because we think that we can live forever and then we'll never do the things we want to do. I think what people do is that they realize that they could just live forever, and then they'll fail to do one very, very important thing, which is absolutely crucial to be able to build a life, to run a business, to build a family, to do whatever it is, anything you want to do, you've determined is a good life. And that is make decisions, make strong decisions, make firm decisions. And I've talked to this with my clients previously before, but I have this new way of making the right decision 100% every single time. I'm going to bring that to you in the next video. So stick with me for next time, and I will see you there.